18 EU. Alrighty. Well, fuck. I killed my lamp again. Right. So, it's live. So this was one of the Deep Thought kit games, and overall I think it's a fairly solid 18XX. It just doesn't happen to be to my liking, towards my tastes, for the same kind of reasons that maybe 18AL and GA don't. I guess one of the biggest reasons is there's not really an opportunity to rape and dump, and what that means is you're free to buy shares in other people's company. I mean, the rules don't enforce anything against it. It's just, it tends to be more harmful, like in 1835, to the person who's actually getting rid of the company than to the person that you're hitting. And it certainly puts the person who's getting rid of it significantly behind everyone else. So the only time it would be valuable is as a complete weapon, just to take down the number one person if you're in number two or something like that. And it may actually be more harmful to the person losing the company than the person getting it. It could be targeted, though, I think, so that it wouldn't be that way. Because you do have the kind of hits that can be very painful to someone's holdings. Beyond that, the track is not, easily sealed off. If you lose a city, you can work your way around it. There are no real strong chokeholds on it. For good or bad, what that means is you kind of always have the opportunity to keep pushing your route further and making it a little bit better. And at the end of the game, the routes are truly humongous, especially since the swallow rules allow you to make half swallows at the key point in the game, and you're able to pull enough money into your company while still gaining stock value if you're in the right location on the stock track. It opens up tiles in a way that most games don't of the series. So, for example, the brown cities. So, cities are one of the few choke points because the main line of track ends up being built along the city. Now, you can skip around the city, but that takes a lot of track lays usually. It takes at least 2 track lays to break into parallel track if that exists. But the brown cities upgrade to a gray city for the standard cities. For the cities that companies start in, they have a little bit more control. Only 2 dots can ever go in there, but the gray cities, up to 3 dots can go in. So they end up the equivalent of the major cities on the board for the most part. What's particularly exciting here? I guess the biggest thing with this game is that everybody just starts with handful of minor companies. You should have at least 2, even in a 6-player game. And they seem to be pretty key. For one thing, no corporations start without a minor company in the beginning stages of the game. Probably, certainly in my playthrough, you will have, look at this. This is what you get when people, with kits. It's used, but and I wouldn't do a better job. That's why I buy other people's kits. So, where am I? I don't know where the hell I am. Oh, shit. I lose my train of thought and it just rides out the track. Oh yeah, the minor companies. So, in order to start a major company in the early part of the game, and chances are you will not be able to start a major company later because they'll all be gone by the time you can start them without a miner company when the miners are all dead. You have to sacrifice one of your miner countries. And your miner companies, power, country, whatever the fuck, anything I can think of, whatever miner company you sacrifice, well, you're giving up something that you're getting 50% of its earnings into your pocket every time it runs. Probably a fairly minimal investment. In the 6-player game, very few of the companies went for over their sort of starting bid. And the ones that didn't, people were able to get up to 3 companies just by paying less than the starting value on them. And honestly, 2-player, even if you distribute them as evenly as possible in a 6-player game, 2 players have to get 3 companies, or 1 person to get 4, I guess. But you're not going to have the money's not available to pay face value in all of these. They start off with a train, no money, and you just start building track for them and running them as quickly as possible. In fact, you can run most of them on the first operating run. It doesn't matter, they don't gain stock value, but you get some cash in your pocket. And that's a pretty good influx of cash, which is a big deal because you always want to make early money, and the miners, because everyone's just concerned with miners at the beginning of the game, it doesn't have the same kind of problem that 1835 has with this kind of, do I want a major corporation or an extra miner? Well, you want an extra miner, but here, once you get to a position where you have enough cash on hand to be able to float the rest of the corporation, which is, you're probably dumping 1 minor company into it, so that's 40% of the corporation value. Then you end up, investing a whole lot more money into a situation that's very similar. 50% of the money goes into your pocket, 50% into the corporation. The difference is you're going to start making stock value off of those. And the other difference is corporations are a limited asset. There's only 8 of them in the game, and there's 15 miners. So, just because you have a miner doesn't mean you're going to get a corporation. In fact, in many cases, you'll dump a couple of miners into a corporation right at the beginning. It leaves you with some very interesting choices, but then after the miners disappear, you're kind of left with very little of interest in the game. It's just this kind of easy, I can break through to anywhere and get my maximal run, and it really just focuses on how can I get my trains, what trains can I get in the game. It might be good for, highlighting that aspect of the 18xx games. In fact, it is good for highlighting that, but you can get that on almost any 18xx game where manipulating and trying to get the trains to come out in the proper order works as, a major part of the game. The simplicity might be an advantage to it being a starting game, but honestly, the difficulty in having to know this particular game in order to choose what the appropriate bid on the different miners is makes it a harder starting game, and one from which maybe you're not learning things that are as useful in later, that are all that useful in later games. Missing a few miners. We'll do that. There they are. The actual component quality, obviously, it depends on the kit you get. If you buy the top-of-the-line Deluxe Deep Thought edition, it's going to be in much better condition than this, which was a print-and-play edition that, the lamination and everything is coming, the lamination's not coming apart, but the pieces are coming off the stock that they were put on. So it's just not in that great a shape. I had the suspicion that this was all mounted before on metal, just because whoever put the tokens together put them on magnets. And that might be why I'm seeing some separation, is that, maybe the laminated map pieces were not as clean as they could have been when they were glued together. But again, it probably was in better shape before it got here, and then sitting on my shelves for a year or whatever in the heat separated them as well. So, but anyway, one thing about the components that I can bring up, though, there's a sort of dullness to them to begin with. I think that's pretty common for the Deep Thought productions. And then also, the actual stock, the corporations don't have their names clearly on them. They have a symbol on them, and that helps you. But a couple of them have very similar symbols, the Austrian double eagle, the German eagle, whatever. And it makes it difficult to necessarily distinguish which one you're looking at any given time. It's not impossible if you take that moment to say, wait a minute, is that the right one? But it is more likely to get confused than it is for me with some of the other games that I've seen. Anyway. The real problem with it is that there's this sort of flatness, especially after the miners are gone. It just feels like there's not much more left to the game. You're optimizing your route. You probably have your trains at that point, and you're just spending a fair amount of the game laying track and making things, getting to where you need to go to make the best money that you can. And I'm not going to say that's unenjoyable. It's just, I end up rating it a little lower, not as low as I do 1835 or probably 53, or maybe 53's got some weird stuff going on in it that's kind of cool. But I rate it a little lower simply because, it's Nebraska. This is the box I got with it. Because there are plenty of 18xx games that allow you most of what this one does. The miners are really the key shining thing, and they stop being of interest about halfway through the game. The train fallout is also very interesting because it takes such a focal place in this particular game. It does in most, but I mean here it's exemplified even more, as is the track play and dot placement. But none of that, except for the miners, is really kind of a new, subtle sort of thing that you have to think about real hard about what you're going to do. So, for the kind of person who's likely to be looking at Deep Thought games, it's not a particularly interesting 18xx. For a newer player, it's better than many of the options. I still would say 1830 is the best thing to start with. Just trial by fire, man. It's not that complicated a game, but it's one of the harsher ones. And by giving you those two things together, it really gives you the biggest feel for what I think most of the 18xx games are like. But if you're not sure that you're going to like a harsher game, this one's not a bad choice, just like some of the others. I think 1860, 1846 are not bad choices either. So, it definitely does have its place. If somebody reprinted it and doing good components, it would make a great choice for a starter game. Unfortunately, it's not easy to get a copy of, so it's not that great a choice because, I paid I don't remember what it was, $60 for this kind of iffy quality copy, and there's no way I could get a copy otherwise. One of the reasons I bought it was because I don't think I'm ever going to get 18OE. Well, the reason I played it, I have 18OE, and I kind of want to compare and take a look at similar, at least territory covered, much greater detail on that one. Many more trains. That's going to be the first monster that I do, and kind of the XX games. There's that and Coast to Coast, which are put out by the same team. And wow, it's got over 1,000 pieces in it. Anyway, this one. Again, it's not a bad choice to start with, I would say, but unless you can find a cheap copy, it's probably not going to hold your interest for too long. I have the feeling once, so the thing that kind of is a barrier to being able to play it right away, geez, these miners, how do I evaluate them? I'm new to the system, what do I do? That's the first thing you're faced with, and it's like, well, shit, man, I guess I'll take something, and, the people who know the game are going to just clean your clock. Well, that's the thing that kind of is the only thing that's of interest in the game to, I think, a more experienced player. I almost feel like the track lays that are going to come out of the initial stock. No, I'm not a cokehead like Donald Trump. The track lays that are going to come out of that initial packet of miners is really not going to be too different in any case. You're not going to see any serious growth from some of these miners simply because they're limited to only playing yellow tiles. So it's not until the corporations form out of them that you get much capability to do anything different from what's almost a pre-programmed, I want to go here, 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 and then I don't get to lay any more track. With some of the miners, you really, you have like 2 tiles to lay, and that's it for half the game, And if you don't make it into a major company, that's all the influence you're going to have early on. We saw that was not necessarily good, but on the other hand, we also saw other problems. In general, it looks like starting a corporation from your miner is not a bad idea, and I probably started them a little too high in my game. Anyway. That's some words that are probably very similar to the words in my wrap-up, except with a little bit of time between playing it and wrapping up.